येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति येष सुप्तेषु जाग्रति कामं 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 कामुरुषो पुरुषो निर्विमानः निर्विमानः तदेव शुक्रं ब्रह्मा तद्ब्रह्मा तदेवामृतमुच्यते तस्मिन् लोकः श्रुतः सर्वे तदूनादिकश्च यतद्वैतं
Good morning, friends. I am C. Rajiv Jain, and today I will be speaking on the subject, that is computation of arm length price in relation to specified domestic transaction. Friends, I am also joined by my co-speaker for the day, Mr. Prakash Shastrabuddhe, and he will be speaking upon the subject business process re-engineering and process reconstructing processes ab initio. I will take the first session. The first session will be up to 11:50, and I will deliberate upon 11:45, and after 11:45 I will take up your questions if any there. And the second session will start from 12 o'clock. That will be taken up by my learned friend. And if any of your question remains out of the first session, that question I will address in the second session. Friends, before I start my deliberation on the subject, first of all, I convey my thanks to CA Charanjot Singh Ji Nanda and CP committee of our institute for having given me this opportunity to come here and share my knowledge and experience on the subject. Friends, we are all aware that with effect from assessment year 2013-2014, the scope of provisions of transfer pricing, that is section 92 to section 92F of the Income Tax Act, has been extended and applied to cover certain domestic transactions. Friends, we are all aware that transfer pricing is an international concept which in the Income Tax Act was introduced with effect from assessment year 2002-2003. The provisions under section 92 to section 92F are borrowed and drafted in accordance with OECD modules. Friends, we understand that transfer pricing provisions are applicable in respect of international transactions and international trade. In the earlier era of international transactions, there were the transactions between the independent parties. The price of the transaction was determined by the market forces. But with globalization, we have seen emergence of multinational corporations. Now we have a multinational corporations whose operations are scattered over different parts of the world, in different countries, in different tax zones. There are countries which have high tax rates, like India, where tax rate is 30%. There may be countries where tax rate is very low. And there may be countries which are tax havens. Now, if a multinational corporation have their operations situated in multi-countries and multi-tax zones, now in their international trade, they could use the pricing of the transaction between the two associated enterprises which are situated in two countries to their advantage by pricing their transaction in such a manner that income in the higher tax zone is minimum and most of the income is transferred to a tax zone where tax rates are low or which is a tax haven country. By using this tax arbitrage, a sufficient amount of income is earned by multinational corporation. Now, the provisions under Section 92 to Section 92F were introduced with a purpose to stop abuse of this transfer pricing, so that legitimate share of income of multinational corporation of the operations which are situated in a particular country is given to that particular country. Now, if we consider domestic scenario, what we will see that India is one tax zone. If I am X Limited, I am taxable at 30%. If I am Y Limited is also taxable at the rate of 30%. If pricing of the transaction between X Limited and Y Limited is arranged in a manner where X Limited transfers certain income to Y Limited, then what is the tax arbitrage? There is no tax arbitrage. Because by booking an expense and making payment to Y Limited, X Limited will be saving tax at the rate of 30%, and the expense booked by X Limited will become income of Y Limited, and Y Limited will be paying tax at the rate of 30%. So, by planning this transaction, by manipulating the price of this transaction, there is no tax arbitrage available. So, as far as India as a country is concerned, there is no revenue loss. Then what was the need for extending these transfer pricing provisions to domestic transactions? Friends, during the course of my discussion, I will only give you brief background of the legal provisions. And my concentration, my endeavor will be to cover the practical aspect as if I am a chartered accountant who have been appointed by the SSC to conduct transfer pricing studies in respect of specified domestic transactions. Friends, now let us understand what is the relevance of transfer pricing provision in a domestic scenario. As I have already discussed with an example, there may not be any tax arbitrage as far as Indian companies are concerned. But tax arbitrage may be there when income is transferred to a loss-making company. Or tax arbitrage will be there when income is transferred to an SSC who is claiming profit-based deductions or exemptions, like under Section 80IA, 80IB, 80IC, 80ID, 80IE or Section 10AA. Or there may be another situation. We are all aware that in India, individual and HUF are taxed on slab basis. Suppose I am a company and I am transferring certain income to individual or HUF or any person who are claiming basic exemption limit and their income is taxed at the rate of at slab rates. In that case also, there can be some tax arbitrage. Friends, whether before the extension of transfer pricing provisions to check abuse of this kind of tax arbitrage, whether there was no provision under the Income Tax Act to stop that abuse or prevent that abuse, the answer is that the Income Tax Act was having sufficient provisions in its garb to prevent such kind of abuse and to prevent such kind of tax arbitrage. The relevant sections were Section 48(2)(b), where power was given to the assessing officer that in case income is paid or transferred to a related party and in the opinion of the assessing officer, if the price of the transaction was excessive or unreasonable, then he had the option, he had the power to ignore the transacted price and replace the value of the transaction by the fair market value. In the same manner, where SSE is claiming profit linked exemption under Chapter 6A Part C, there is Section 80A subsection 6, 80IA subsection 8 and 80IA subsection 10. Under these sections, power is given to the assessing officer to replace the transacted price with a market price. Now the question arises, if sufficient existing provisions were there under the Income Tax Act to prevent such kind of tax arbitrage and to prevent such kind of abuse of the provisions of the Income Tax Act, what was the need for extending transfer pricing to such kind of transactions? Friends, the Honorable Supreme Court, in the case of GlaxoSmithKline 195 Taxman 35, made certain observations. And these observations were that under Section 48(2)(b) or some other sections, power has been given to the assessing officer to replace the transacted price by the market price of the goods. But the law does not prescribe any objective formula how market price or fair market value of the transaction has to be determined. So, lot of subjectiveness was involved in the approach of the assessing officer. The Honorable Apex Court further commented that legislators should think of applying transfer pricing provisions and the manner in which arm's length price is determined in transfer pricing, then arm's length price could be taken as a benchmark for the purpose of computation of market price or fair market value of a transaction. Now, this suggestion and observation of the Honorable Apex Court was grabbed by the department with open hands and both hands. And why they grabbed it, friends? During the last year, the total direct tax collection of Indian economy was rupees 5 lakh crore. Out of that, my friends, TP litigation contributed 45,000 crores to the government exchequer. So, legislators accepted the suggestion of the Supreme Court, and from this assessment year onwards, transfer pricing provisions which are applicable in respect of international transaction have been extended to cover certain specified domestic transactions, and the method of computation of arm's length price which were applicable in respect of international transactions have now been applied to cover the domestic transactions. If we go to the legislations, the amendments have been made under Section 48(2)(b), under Section 80A subsection 6, under Section 80A subsection 8, under Section 80A subsection 10, a new Section 92BA has been introduced to the Income Tax Act, which defines specified domestic transaction. And the charging section is 92 subsection 2A. Friends, I will not go into the legal provisions. It can be argued at length that there are shortcomings in the drafting. Law could have been drafted in a better manner. It can also be argued at length that the respective rules which are applicable in respect of transfer pricing have not been amended. But now, my friends, we are at the end of October, and we all know that by 30th November, we have to file transfer pricing report in form number 3CEB under Section 92E of the Income Tax Act. So, we have to make compliance of the law in its present form, and whatever is the mandate of law, we have to follow. So, today, with this brief background, my friends, my endeavor will be as if I am a chartered accountant who is appointed by the SSC to conduct transfer pricing studies and give my report under Section 92E of the Income Tax Act in relation to a specified domestic transaction. I will discuss step by step how should I proceed and how should I compute arm length price. Friends, my first step in this direction after seeking appointment letter from the SSC will be to gather information about the SSC. What is the legal status of the SSC? Whether it's a proprietorship firm, proprietorship concern, partnership firm, limited company, which are the related parties of the SSC? What is the nature of business of the SSC? What is the nature of product manufactured by the SSC? What are the economic regulations? What is the regulatory framework? What are the tax exemptions which are applicable to the SSC? What is the manufacturing process? What is the main raw material? Where from raw material is sourced? And what is my finished product? Where my market is situated? And how the rates of raw material and my sales are determined? Whether they are determined by a regulatory kind of a market like stock exchange or a commodity exchange, whether this is a seasonal kind of industry, all these information, and you may apply your common sense and your mind to gather sufficient information from the SSC. This entire information, my friends, has to be prepared in black and white. आपको उसका एक नोट बनाना है. Representation has to be taken from the SSC and that should form part of your working papers. Once I have got sufficient knowledge about the SSC and its business and where the manufacturing units or principal place of business of the SSC are situated and which are the principal place of businesses where separate books of accounts are maintained. After gathering this information, my first step is complete. Now I will move to second step. My second step will be identification and analysis of specified domestic transactions. For executing this step, for the purpose of discussion, I will divide the SSC, the class of SSC, in two categories. The first category is an SSC who does not have any unit which is claiming profit linked exemption, which is referred to as eligible unit. And the second category is of the SSC which is having units which are situated in exempted zones, which are claiming profit linked exemption. In the first category of the SSC, all the units of the SSC are situated outside the exempted zone and none of the units of the SSC claims any exemption under Chapter 6A, Part C or Section 10AA. In the second category of the SSC, I take an example of the SSC that one unit of my SSC is situated in Jammu and Kashmir, which is claiming exemption under Section 80IB. The second unit of the SSC is situated in Himachal Pradesh, which is claiming exemption under Section 80IC. And third marketing office is situated in New Delhi, where no exemption is available. And in the second category of the SSC, all the units maintain their separate books of accounts and the final balance sheet of the SSC is prepared after consolidation. Now I will first deal with first category of the SSC. In the first category of the SSC, what I have to do is, I have to look at the profit and loss account of the SSC. We are already in the month of October, and in most of the cases, audit of the balance sheet as of 31st March 2013 must have been completed. So, in the first category of the SSC, I will go through the profit and loss account. I will have a look at the debit side of the profit and loss account. Mind my friends, note my words. In the first category of the SSC, we are not supposed to have a look at the credit side of my profit and loss account for the purpose of making TP studies in respect of specified domestic transactions. Now, out of the debit entries which are appearing in my profit and loss account, I will identify the transaction in respect of which payment is made to my related party under section 48(2)(b). I will make a list. From the debit side, what I am required to exclude is my opening stock and my depreciation. And all other expenses, including purchases, direct expenditure or all indirect expenditures, I have to identify the payments which have been made to related parties under section 48(2)(b). I will note down these transactions, or if the SSC tax audit of the SSC under section 44(ab) has already been conducted, then that information of payments made to related party under section 48(2)(b) is handy, and I can rely upon the information given in form number 3CD. Now, this is my first category of specified domestic transaction. I will note it down. Then I will check whether the SSC has disallowed any payment which is made to a related party in his computation of income. Meaning thereby, if a particular amount is debited to my profit and loss account for which payment is made to a related party under section 48(2)(b), and the SSC does not claim deduction in its computation of income for that expense, then from the list which I have prepared, I will have to reduce the amount of disallowance which the SSC is making in its computation of income. So, my first category of specified domestic transaction is ready. Now, I will move to second category of the SSC. The second category of the SSC, as I have already discussed, is having one unit in Jammu and Kashmir, another unit in Himachal Pradesh, and the third marketing office in New Delhi. Now, I have consolidated balance sheet of the SSC as well as independent balance sheet of Jammu and Kashmir unit, independent balance sheet of Himachal Pradesh unit, and independent balance sheet of Delhi unit before consolidation. I am also having consolidation papers with me. In this case, my friends, I will disregard the consolidated balance sheet. I will take individual balance sheet of Jammu and Kashmir, individual balance sheet of Himachal Pradesh, and individual balance sheet and profit and loss account of the unit marketing office in Delhi. As far as marketing office in Delhi is concerned, this nature of specified domestic transaction will be the same as we have discussed in first category of the SSC. I am only required to identify the payments which are made to a related party under section 48(2)(b), which are debited to profit and loss account and for which the SSC is claiming allowance. Now, I move to Jammu and Kashmir unit. In Jammu and Kashmir unit, my first category of transaction will be payments made to related parties under section 48(2)(b). My second category of specified domestic transaction will be if Jammu and Kashmir unit is having sales and purchases from a unit from the marketing office situated in Delhi. It may be sale of goods or it may be sale of services, it may be purchase of goods or it may be purchase of services. If there are transactions between the Jammu and Kashmir units with Delhi unit, what I am required to consider? Purchases as well as sales. I will note it down. Then I will see whether the Jammu and Kashmir unit is having certain sale purchase transactions with Himachal Pradesh unit. If such transactions are there, that is to be identified only in respect of sales, purchases of goods and services. No other transaction is to be touched. For Jammu and Kashmir unit, the transaction between the Delhi unit with the Delhi unit and transaction with Himachal Pradesh unit becomes relevant for the purpose of computation of specified domestic transaction. So, in case of an exempted unit, my first class of the transaction is payment to related party under section 48(2)(b). Second is purchase and transaction of purchases and sales with Delhi unit, and the third is transaction of purchases and sales with Himachal Pradesh unit. I will note it down. The same exercise I will undertake at Himachal Pradesh unit. Now, I will aggregate all these transactions of Jammu and Kashmir unit, Himachal Pradesh unit and the unit marketing office at Delhi. If aggregate of all these transactions exceeds rupees 5 crore, then provisions of transfer pricing are applicable on me and the SSE is required to obtain transfer pricing report in form number 3CEB from a chartered accountant. I am supposing that in the present case, the aggregate transactions of specified domestic transactions exceeds rupees 5 crore. There is fourth kind of transaction which is defined in subclause 4 of section 92BA, where an exempted unit in a transaction with a close connection is deriving more than abnormal profit in the opinion of the assessing officer. Then assessing officer can consider that close connection as my related party, and transaction with that close connection will also become my specified domestic transaction. But my friends, this option has to be exercised by the assessing officer. As a chartered accountant conducting TP studies, I cannot apply my mind and I cannot use this discussion. In the fifth clause of section 92BA, they have extended the scope of section 80A subsection 6 or 80IA subsection 8 and 10 to cover all other sections like 10AA, 80IAB, 80IB, 80IC, 80ID and 80IE. And in the sixth clause, the nature of specified domestic transaction to be specified is given to the CBDT to prescribe any such transaction, and till date no such transaction is prescribed by CBDT. Now I have identified the transactions which are covered under specified domestic transaction. Now I will analyze those transactions. What is the nature of transaction? What is the nature of the product? What is the nature of the expense? What was the timing at which transaction was executed? What was the market scenario at that particular time? What are the terms and conditions? So, after identification of my specified domestic transactions, I have to make analysis of each and every transaction, and I have to move those transactions to a particular category, whether this is transaction of purchase, whether this is transaction of sales, whether this is purchase of goods, whether it is purchase of services. If these are purchase of goods and services, what are the nature of services and what is the nature of goods? If this is a transaction of payment, then I have to identify whether this is interest, whether this is rent, or whether this is any other expenditure which is incurred under any other head of expense. After identification of my specified domestic transaction, my next step will be searching for the comparable. I will extend my earlier example. I am X Limited and I have made certain payments to Y Limited, which is my related party, or which is my another unit situated at Himachal Pradesh or Delhi. Suppose I have purchased certain goods or services from Y Limited, or I have made some payment for certain expenses like interest, rent, whatever be the expense to Y Limited. In the first step, I have to search for comparables which are internally available with X Limited. I will go through the business transactions of X Limited, whether a comparable transaction which can be reasonably compared with a specified domestic transaction has been undertaken by the SSE with any other independent party. Whether X Limited has purchased similar kind of goods or similar kind of services or expended similar kind of expenditure to an independent party which can be compared with the nature of transaction of specified domestic transaction. So my first comparable will be internal comparable which is available with X Limited. Now I suppose a case that this was a sole transaction of purchase from Y Limited and I do not have, X Limited does not have any independent comparable. There is no internal comparable available with X Limited. Now, I will go to the books of accounts of Y Limited. Because Y Limited, which has sold certain goods to me or which has rendered certain services to me, may have been rendering or such service to an independent party or may be selling such goods to an independent party. In that case, sale of Y Limited to an independent party or provision of service by Y Limited to an independent party becomes my comparable. That is my second stage of internal comparable. Friends, if the situation arises that internal comparable with X Limited are not available, internal comparable with Y Limited are also not available, then I have to go for external comparables. External comparables may be stock market data. In case of interest, it may be bank rates. It may be rates of the non-banking financial company. There may be some published data which are authenticated and their market prices, and there may be so many external data which can be selected as comparable. But in my first endeavor, I should first rule out first category of comparable. If first category of comparable is not available, then I will move to comparable with Y Limited. If that category of comparable is also not available, then I will move to third category of comparables. These are external comparables. Friends, once I have selected the comparable, now always if two transactions has taken place at a different time, some difference is bound to occur between the character of both the transactions. It may be due to timing differences, there may be difference in terms and conditions, there may be other differences. Friends, in order to compare my specified domestic transaction with a comparable which I have selected, I have to bring both the transactions to the same platform. For that purpose, now I am required to make adjustments with my comparable. Note it down, my friends, I cannot make any adjustment with the price recorded in my books of accounts in respect of specified domestic transaction. Whatever adjustment I am required to make is to be made in the case of price of the comparable, so as to bring both the transaction at the same level, at the same platform. These adjustments are known as FAR adjustments. Functions performed, assets employed, risk assumed. There may be transaction level differences, there may be accounting level differences, and there may be entity level differences. These differences have to be ruled out, have to be identified. And friends, if I am in a position to identify the differences, FAR differences, but I am not in a position to quantify the financial impact of that FAR difference, in that case, my friends, that comparable has to be rejected. My next step, my friends, will be selection of the most appropriate method. We are all aware that the 5 methods prescribed under Rule 10B of the Income Tax Act, of the Income Tax Rules, are adopted from OECD. First is CUP method, comparable uncontrolled price. Second is resale price method. Third is cost plus method. Fourth is profit split method. And the fifth is transaction net margin method. And there is another 6th method which is prescribed by CBDT under Rule 10AB. I will first discuss CUP method. This is the most preferred method for comparing my specified domestic transaction with the comparable. And for the computation of arm length price, in my initial stage, in my first stage, I have to choose implementation of this particular formula, because this is the most direct method of comparable for the purpose of determination of arm length price. And unless and until I rule out application of this formula, I will not be in a position to look for other formulas. In case of CUP method, my friends, I have already discussed that first we have to select internal comparables, then we have to look for external comparables, we have to make FAR adjustments, and after conducting FAR adjustments, that becomes my arm length price. Clear? This method is transaction specific and product sensitive. If I am not in a position to find a similar comparable, internal or external, then working of this formula fails. But as far as domestic scenario is concerned, in most of the case, this formula will be applied. This formula fails its application only in the case when SSE is dealing in monopolistic kind of a thing, where comparables are not available either internally or externally. So whether this is payment of interest, whether this is payment of rent, whether this is payment of any expense, or whether this is payment of my purchase. For all these, for determining arm length price of all these expenditure, CUP method can be applied. Friends, second method is resale price method. There is one limitation of resale price method, my friends. Resale price method can be applied only for determination of arm length price of my purchase. It cannot be applied for determination of arm length price of any item other than purchase of goods or purchase of services. And I will move to this formula only and only when I first reject CUP method. In this case, my friends, we identify the transaction, the controlled purchase, where payment is made to a related party. Then we identify the respective sale of this purchase. After identification of the sales, that sale price is taken as a benchmark. And from this sale price, I will reduce my adjusted GP margin of the SSC from uncontrolled transaction. What I will do is, I will select similar kind of transactions of the SSC which are uncontrolled, and I will prepare a GP chart and determine what was the GP of the SSC in respect of uncontrolled transaction. Then from this sale price, I will reduce that adjusted gross profit margin. Then I will reduce the actual expenditure of purchases from my related party which I incurred. After reduction of expenses for purchases, and if there are some FAR differences, in resale price method, FAR differences are very minimum, and the result is arm length price of my purchase from a related party. First, third method is cost plus method. In cost plus method, this formula can be applied only to determine sale price of a particular SSC. This formula cannot be applied for the purpose of determination of any expense, arm length price of anything which is appearing on my debit side of profit and loss account. In this case, my friends, I start my journey from direct cost in respect of sale which is made to a controlled party, which are to sales which is made to a related party. I add this with indirect costs, and I will add it by the adjusted GP margin from uncontrolled transaction, and the result will be my arm length price under cost plus method. The fourth method is profit split method. In profit split method, I am continuing with the earlier example. I am having independent balance sheet of Jammu and Kashmir unit, independent balance sheet of Himachal Pradesh unit, and independent balance sheet of Delhi unit. I will combine profit and loss account of all these three entities, 3 units. I will come to the figure of the combined net profit of the SSC. Then I will divide this combined net profit into 3 parts, one which can be attributed to Jammu and Kashmir, one which can be attributed to Himachal Pradesh, and one which can be attributed to Delhi unit. And that division has to take place on the basis of some economically valid formula that has to be based upon functions performed by each unit, risk assumed by each unit, assets employed by each unit, and that formula has to be reasonable, and on some reasonable basis I apportion and divide the profit among Jammu and Kashmir unit, Himachal Pradesh unit, and unit situated in Delhi. This is known as profit split method. Fifth method, my friend, is transaction net margin method. Transaction net margin method is mainly used in a monopolistic kind of a situation where comparables are neither available internally or externally. Lot of material is available as far as TNMM method is concerned, and due to paucity of time, I skip the discussion on TNMM method, because in domestic scenario, this formula will be seldomly applied. Now the sixth method is the method prescribed by the CBDT under Rule 10AB. Suppose SSC demonstrate that none of the formula has application to the character of the business of the SSC, to the nature of the business of the SSC. Then CBDT has given liberty to the SSC, okay, then come out with your own formula, devise your own formula, provided that it takes into consideration the price charged or paid, or would have been charged or paid in a similar kind of circumstances, considering all relevant facts. Friends, wording of this rule make one thing very important. In case, before making out any expenditure to a related party, I carried out certain negotiation with the independent parties. And I knew beforehandedly, if I have undertaken, if I have outsourced the same job to an independent party, it would have cost me more. Instead, when I got this job done from a related party, I have derived certain benefits. So all these negotiation papers becomes important, because the term used is price would have been charged. That becomes my comparable, my friends. So in case some negotiation documents are available, some tender process are available, and we are able to demonstrate that the price paid to a related party is lesser than the price quoted by an independent party, then the price quoted by the independent party, subject to FAR adjustments, become my arm length price in sixth method of accounting. There are certain issues, my friends, because all these methods will fail application, or some litigation is bound to arise in respect of certain transactions. If I have purchased land from a related party, whether the circle rate which is defined, stamp duty rate, which is taken as a part of as sale consideration under section 50C, can be taken as a comparable, or I have to take a comparable of the adjoining property. That's a significant issue which is going to arise. To my mind, I will go to the sixth method, which is prescribed by the CBDT. And in a similar set of circumstances, law has provided me a comparable. Similar situation may arise when I have given payment to my partner as salary, remuneration or interest. What will be my comparable? Whether I can say that my comparable is provided by section 40B itself, where it says that interest should not exceed more than 12% and certain percentages are prescribed for the purpose of determination of remuneration. To my mind, I can do that. Now, there are another situations. Suppose I am making there is a question which generally arises: what will be the impact of MAT? Whether the transacted price which is recorded in my books of accounts has to be adjusted for the purpose of payment of minimum alternative tax is a very relevant question. By applying transfer pricing provisions, what I am required to do is, I am required to substitute my transacted price with arm length price for the purpose of computation of my income, for the purpose of determining my income under the Income Tax Act. I am not supposed to make any entry or modify the transacted price. Friends, there is a clear mandate that whatever adjustments are required, they have to be made in the computation of income, and no adjustment is required to be made in my books of accounts, and MAT liability will arise only in accordance with the transactions which are recorded in my books of accounts. There may be another issue, my friends, in respect of director's salary. If I am paying salary to my director, what will be the comparable? There may be a private limited company or a public limited company which is paying remuneration to directors which may be in crores. There may be transactions where nominal amount of remuneration is given to the directors. How should I find comparable for director's salary? The issue is going to arise, and litigation is bound to come on this issue because a lot of clarification is required. One point comes to my mind: if my assessment was completed under section 143 subsection 3 in earlier years, And director remuneration, which was debited to my profit and loss account, was allowed by the assessing officer while completing assessment of the earlier year. Now, whether I can demonstrate and say that because this remuneration was allowed by the assessing officer while completing assessment under section 143(3) in the earlier assessment year, it should be taken as my comparable. I can use my friend's sixth method and I can agitate that my assessment which was completed in the earlier years becomes my arm length price. With this, my friends, I have tried to complete each and every aspect of computation of arm length price in respect of specified domestic transactions. Though topic is very wide, very vast, but I have tried to cover each and everything, and I conclude here. After and before conclusion, I convey my thanks again to the Secretary of CP Committee, Sri Bansalji, the entire staff, and more particularly CA Charanjot Singh Ji Nanda, for giving me this opportunity to come here and lead the discussion and share my knowledge on the subject. And I also convey my thanks to my learned co-speaker, Sri Sahasrabudhe Ji, and I convey my thanks to all of you. Thank you very much. Namaskar.